Hi, good morning. This is Soumitra Ghosh. So, before we start the session 2 today, I hope all of you were there as we agreed last time that at exactly 11 o'clock we will start the session, though we are around 1 or 2 minutes late today. So, few logistics information. One is that as we discussed last time that few dates probably would not be convenient for all the participants. Definitely for 25th and 26th of December and probably 2nd of January. These are the two dates were not very convenient, and I got few communications from the participants. So we are trying to give some alternative dates for to replace those dates. So CII would actually write back to you about the alternative dates. So the sessions on 2nd and 22nd January and 26th of December stand cancelled. We will reach back to you very soon with alternative dates. And also there was a session, I think it was on 16th. We are changing the session on a different date. We will also get back to you with an alternative date for that session also. So that next week, actually on Tuesday, we were supposed to have one session. So we'll change that date and we'll give you another date. So what we are trying to do is all these 3 dates will change, and probably by February we will have the sessions to make up all these 3 dates. With that, I got only one communication from Mr. Manish post the first session. Thank you, Mr. Manish, and he has expressed interest to take an assignment on early childhood care and development. I am yet to get any communication from all of you on the assignment. So if anybody wants to take an assignment, as I said last time, that you need to let me know, and we'll have to finalize the topic right now. And after that, probably we cannot really choose the topic. So please, if any of you are interested to take an assignment, choose a topic right now. And you can send me a couple of topics. You can say that we can have a discussion and see that what topic would be better, what would be suitable for you. That can be done, but at least you start the process. Otherwise, at the last moment, it would be really a rush. So we don't want to get into that. With that, we'll start the session today. We'll do a little bit of recap of what we have discussed last time, and then we'll move on to the next stage of the course. Now, a quick recap. As we saw last time, that corporate social responsibility is not mere risk mitigation or compliance issue, or it is not only a charity, but it makes sense business-wise, it makes sense politically, it makes sense in different aspects ethically, and it has much broader perspective than usually what we act on. So generally, we probably discuss a lot of things about corporate social responsibility, but unfortunately what happens is that most of the companies, when they get into that act, they get into a very narrow perspective of CSR. Either it is a community relationship building, it's a kind of community work, it's a community development work, or we get into some kind of risk mitigation with the community, compliance, just for the sake of compliance, we do some kind of work, and which does not have any relevance to the business value. So later we will also discuss that how to create that kind of social value in the business, and how these social value and the business value can be aligned together, and it should be an integrated approach, corporate social responsibility with the business. It should not be an isolated activity, disconnected totally with the core business principles. Now, we saw that globally it is a much broader perspective what is emerging. We have gone through that EU Commission, European Commission perspective, which is saying a concept whereby companies integrate social and environmental concerns in their business operations and in their interaction with the stakeholders on a voluntary basis. Now the key word is voluntary basis, and also it is all saying that companies integrate social and environmental concerns in their business. So it is not a separate disconnected activity, it is an integrated operation in the business itself. And also it is also talking about the stakeholders, how do we really interact with the stakeholders, and it is talking about a voluntary act. So when we see that in Indian context, especially today we'll discuss the Companies Act, particularly Section 135, where actually CSR has been mandated. But as a concept, the way it has been emerged, and the way we look at corporate social responsibility, for the sake of doing good business, the businesses will actually get into that act. So it is not regulated by the government primarily. It is actually the business in a particular environment, in a particular business environment, to do a good business. They will have to be responsive to the society and to the environment, and that is why they will get into certain act. As we talked about the business responsibility perspective, it is more than the corporate social responsibility perspective. To act as a responsible business and a sustainable business, they will have to get into that. So it is more of a voluntary, the drive from and within the business than it comes from the government. When we talk about business, it actually includes the market, so that we'll have to look at the stakeholders, the customers, their demand, their expectations. We'll have to look at the media. We'll have to look at different kind of NGOs and civil society organizations. We'll have to look at the expectation of the investors, very importantly, right? And then we'll have to see that what kind of behavior the business will demonstrate to actually meet all these expectations, and that is why they will have to be responsible. Now, if we look at the WBCSD perspective, that is CSR is the private sector contribution to sustainable development. So that what they are talking about, it is talking about sustainable development. It does not mean always only, community development work, but it means that, how the whole development aspect is much broader concept of a sustainable development when we are talking about what the way the businesses will contribute to the sustainable development overall. That is the corporate social responsibility. It's not mere risk mitigation within the community, so that, some political leader might create some problem. So we install few hand pumps and you construct some toilets, and, we do a little bit of appeasement of the community, and that is what is corporate social responsibility. It's not at all. Now, we discussed about different ways of looking at corporate social responsibility, the logics of corporate social responsibilities. We saw the instrumental theories, where actually we are saying that any corporate social responsibility or business responsibility, any behavior of such has a definite business return. That is what the instrumental point of view. Then we looked at integrative point of view. Then we said that, you cannot really separate corporate social responsibility from business itself. It is a way of doing good business. So it is integrated business, depends on society, integrate social demands. So that, in a system of the society, as the business is also an institution, social institution, then definitely there is a kind of reciprocal responsibility and rights within a system of the society. So that is why we are calling it an integrative point of view. Then we looked at that very interesting point of view of political. We discussed that actually by wide acceptance of the new role of business, in the societal fabric, and a broader role. It is much broader than only doing good, making profit, but acting responsibly and responding to the social need through its business. Definitely the business is actually getting a wider sphere of authority and power. Sometimes it is actually sharing a lot of traditional power and authority of the state, because if you see that development, if you take development as a sphere, it was traditionally was a responsibility of the government now, or the states. Now if business is actually legitimately getting into that, and we see that in India particularly, it is a legitimate right of the businesses, and it is a responsibility of the businesses by the mandate of Companies Act. Definitely they are getting a much broader sphere of authority, influence and power, and by that we are actually legitimizing their wider perspective and to share some of the powers and authority in terms of development with the state. So this is another point of view, ethical point of view, that whether there is a business return or not, whether there is another whatever the reason, ethically the businesses will have to be responsible and responsive to the society and the environment. So that is the ethical point of view. Now, very quickly, we also discussed about different categories. Now, these are not exclusively mutually exclusive, right? As we said that some of the acts might have different kind of motivations. They are not mutually exclusive, but for our understanding, for the ease of understanding, what we can do is that we can put corporate social responsibility motivation wise in different brackets. What are these? Philanthropic, as we said that it's a checkbook philanthropy, so the business is not expecting any business return. They are not getting into even risk mitigation, compliance. They are not looking into sustainable development or market sustainability or anything, but they wanted to do something good, as it is one of the probably instinct of human being of doing something good. As you know that prehistorically people even used to do some charity and philanthropy. Today we do that, and in future all human beings will be doing that, with all bad behaviors and instincts what human beings have. But we have something called humanity, and that is some instinct, and definitely naturally I think that even the businesses, whatever the sphere we go, some philanthropic aspect of corporate social responsibility will remain as an humanity response. The second aspect, the second category, we discussed about the risk mitigation. We talked about compliance. We talked about the community-based risk. We talked about to mitigate the risk coming from different stakeholders. So, it might be a strategy. Corporate social responsibility could be a strategy to mitigate some of these risks. The third one we discussed in and we elaborated a little bit. We saw that how carefully drafted corporate social responsibility could also be a good business strategy. We discussed about the HUL case, Hindustan Unilever, that Shakti Amma project. We discussed about the Britannia biscuit case. We see that by doing those kind of corporate social responsibility or those social activities, what they are doing is that they are influencing their cost or price factor. Either they are actually getting into a wider network of marketing agents and reaching out to the remote corner and even at the household level with the products, and also creating need. We also discussed about how do you actually do that social marketing and all. So this is another very interesting aspect, and we see that corporate social responsibility, one of the motivation of corporate social responsibility could be that also. And ultimately we discuss about the structural corporate social responsibility. That means the business by itself is born to serve some purpose, social purpose, or create some social value, and when the profit actually becomes an incidental aspect for that particular business to survive, to sustain, to create that value, they earn profit. So that is broadly what we discussed about different aspects, different motivations, and motivation wise how we can actually look at corporate social responsibilities. But as I said, again I would repeat that these are not mutually exclusive. Some of the companies might be the same activity, might be a little bit of philanthropic motivation. There might be a little bit of risk mitigation also. So that could happen. So, and then also we discussed that UN framework. of corporate social business responsibility. Then we got into the business responsibility perspective. We are not calling it corporate social responsibility. It is a business responsibility perspective. And we saw that there are three aspects: economic, social, and environmental. In economic aspects, we saw that combating bribery and corruption, investing in infrastructure, creating jobs, contributing to local economy, generating sales and profits, driving innovations, paying tax responsibly. These are all economic responsibility of a business. So that, we saw that a business, if it is not making profit and if it is not generating employment and income, probably it is not a responsible business in the first, sense. Then if we see that, that business is not governed properly, so it is actually doing the business in an unfair means. It is taking unfair means to do the business. Definitely that is not a responsible business. So, that is a viewpoint. So that we see that, it is not only doing some community work, it is not doing some, donation, it is not only partnering with some NGOs or, that kind of activities, but also it talks about the governance of the business. So that how do you manage and govern your business itself responsibly? That is also, one of the key and core aspect of business responsibility perspective. Now, if you look at the social aspects, we see that only one aspect which is aligned to the general perception and also the mandate of Companies Act, that is the good community relations. So, or something doing good in the community. The other aspects of the social responsibility of business is good working condition, treating suppliers fairly, respecting human rights, ensuring product safety, complying with the law. So these are all the social responsibility in a broader sense. And then the environmental. Now, if you look at this broader, framework of corporate responsibility or business responsibility, then definitely you'll see that when we will discuss today about the Companies Act, and you will see that we are actually in a Companies Act has a very limited scope within that. But why we are discussing about these broad frameworks is that if no business today is confined within a limit, a small area, the boundaries have become really blurred between countries. So, any business has a global impact, and any global impact has global changes, has impact on the businesses. Now, if you really want to see that macro level perspective and macro level business environment, what is merging across the boundaries, then you will have to see that it is not only about that section 135 of Companies Act in India. You will have to probably align your business with that global expectation, because no business in today's environment is a local business, as we discussed. So, and definitely many of you are actually doing a global business, part of global business, so that we cannot have two different kind of strategies, which might be sometimes, mutually contradictory in terms of corporate social responsibility for an individual company if we are acting globally or we want to act globally. Now, the environmental aspects, going back to the same framework, we are talking about minimizing waste emission, using energy and resource efficiency, protecting biodiversity, using environmentally sound material and energy, minimizing use of hazardous substances. So those are the things. So we see that corporate social responsibility is actually a much broader aspect than only the community work or risk mitigation or philanthropy. So that when we get into the discussion, we'll have to actually have that broader perspective and try to see that it is important to comply with the local law. Definitely we'll have to do something about that Companies Act, and that might be one of the minimum thing what you will be doing, what a good business should do, and their business perspective or responsible business perspective should not be confined within only that section 135. We will get into the discussion, and probably we can get into the debate when we'll discuss or after we discuss Companies Act today. Now, let us see that is there any business case for CSR. Now, if we see that a particular school, they say that, there is a typical business school for corporate social, business return for corporate social responsibility. But many a times, these business returns are not very immediate returns. That we need to understand. And always, it is not that, in this particular generation, that, a very, very obvious example if I give, that when we look at that environmental impact and what we are doing about the environment, whether we are uh, saving the environment or we are exploiting the environment, the impact might be in our generation will not get, right? But that's a long run, very long term changes and long term harms or benefits we are talking about. In social aspects also, we see a lot of changes, a lot of benefits, or the negative impacts will be very long term. So that in many cases, it's very difficult to link the business return with the corporate social responsibility. In most of the cases, it is hypothetical, and logically we will have to see that what is the theory of change, that what we would be doing and what kind of benefit in terms of sustainability of the market or sustainability of the business or the immediate benefit, what kind of things will be there. So there should be, for each company, at least there should be some logical hypothesis that why we are doing this. Is there any return? What is the social return? What is the economic return? What is the environmental return of this particular thing? So with that, today we'll discuss few cases where we see that immediate return is visible. Immediate returns can be measured, and definitely it's very difficult to even, again, I'm saying to say that it is only for this particular act. It is very difficult to do that. But broadly, we can see that there is a huge impact on the business because of their particular responsible behavior in terms of socially, environmentally, and economically. So before that, let's look at that. What are the drivers? Why businesses might do corporate social responsibility? If we look around, we see that practically, there are different drivers, motivations. Brand image, reputation, definitely one of the things we see that companies, by doing social activities, they want to be more socially responsible. They want to be looked as more socially responsible, environmentally responsible business. Competition, there is an aspect of competition, competitive edge over other companies with the same product and services. When the quality differentiation, quality differentials of the product and services, cost differentials for product and services are actually coming to a kind of saturation, then you create different kind of values, and it might be a social value, and see that what kind of competition you can get into. Business ethics, we talked about. Risk mitigation, we talked about. Innovation and sustainability of business. Now this is something very important. If you look at again that Prahlad's bottom of the pyramid theory. So if you see that innovations come, innovations for what? Innovations to meet the necessities of people, right? And most of the innovations, if we see that if doing a business in the and at the base of the pyramid, see that what kind of product innovation, what kind of business innovation can actually meet the need. And at the same time, we see that many of these innovations are coming from the bottom of the pyramid. So how do we actually capture those innovation and do a futuristic business? So to do that and to survive the business through the cycles of innovations at grassroots, you will have to relate with the grassroots, and probably you will have to have a different kind of corporate social responsibility. It is more of a strategic corporate social responsibility because it would actually directly impact your business. Then if we talk about stakeholders' expectation, that we have already discussed. Pressure from media or client, you understand. Legal compliance, we see that the recent increased interest on corporate social responsibilities in Indian market because of the Companies Act. Social activism, unfortunately, it's not too much. There are few instances, good instances in India, but it's not that social activism is not that strong which is actually keeping a vigil on the business behavior. But globally, we see that there are very, very strong movements which is actually forcing the businesses to behave in a social, in a responsible manner. Development on guidelines and standards, we see the Companies Act has come. Before that, we have the national voluntary guidelines. There are several international guidelines and standards. We will discuss today about that. That actually influence the business behavior. Now, if you see the benefits of CSR to key stakeholders, to the company, what are those? Just to sum up our discussion till now: improved brand image, customer loyalty, employee retention, competitive advantage, cost savings, access to finance, good community relationship, better stakeholder management, innovation. These are the benefits, we can actually jot down broadly for the companies. For the investors, maximize the social impact of their investment, reducing non-financial risks. So that these are the direct interest of the investors to invest in a socially responsible enterprise. For the employees, as I said, that in India, in the Companies Act, you cannot do anything for the employees and call it corporate social responsibility. But when we talk about a socially responsible business, you cannot exclude your employees. They are one of the most important stakeholders. In many cases in India and abroad, we see that there are probably in a company, more than 50% of the workforce is a contractual workforce. And we close our eyes, look and to, because close our eyes to see that, a lot of exploitations are happening with these contractual laborers, their work condition, the kind of compensation they get, the kind of welfare measures are there. Because they're contractual laborers, the company actually wash their hands and say that, we are not responsible for them. But if it is like that, in your business operation, core business operation, one of the most important stakeholder is working in exploitative situation. How can we talk about social responsibility and do some kind of philanthropic work, construction, some temples, or install some hand pumps and say that we are socially responsible business? So that is one aspect you need to think about. That is one of the contradictions, in the narrow concept of corporate social responsibility, as we see reflected in the Companies Act in India, and you see the broader concept of social responsibility of a business. Now, if we look at the community, what are the benefits they get? Improved quality of life, education, healthcare, employment, etc., community well-being, environmental benefits, etc., etc. This is again, we have already discussed these things, so I'll skip that to get into the business cases straightway. Now, let us pick up the case of body shop, making green fashionable, the body shop. The body shop forged a reputation as a responsible business long before it becomes fashionable. They were on the first companies to publish a full report on their CSR initiative. The founder, Anita Rodriguez, was very passionate about the environmental protection, animal rights, community trade, human rights, etc., etc. The company has gone so far as to start the Body Shop, a foundation which supports fellow pioneers who would normally struggle to get funding. Over 20 years ago, the company set up a fair trade program well before the term fair trade started to become popular on supermarket shelves. One of the pioneers in fair trade, movement, this Body Shop. The Body Shop is famous for its anti-animal testing stances. Whilst this makes testing their product more difficult, especially in markets such as the USA and Japan, their position has created a loyal customer base. The results from opening her first store in 1976, 30 years later, Annie Rodriguez empire was taken over by L'Oreal for $652 million, where it has continued to make annual profit over $40 million, right? So we see that, this is a way, as we see that, what kind of social value you create. Now you see that, how intelligently they created that social value, the fair trade value, They are not testing their products on animals, and by that how they are maximizing the business value. They are creating a different segment in the market, the fair trade segment in the market. And by that, it is not that it is a philanthropic work. It is not that they will have to compromise with the profit. By that, they are maximizing the profit by creating that social value. Now, this is one of the best example. How do you do a good business in a socially responsible manner, environmentally responsible manner, and you can maximize your profit. Now, if you look at the second case today, this is a Walt Disney case. Moving and making cartoons. Today, the Walt Disney Company additionally owns the ESPN and ABC network, holiday resorts and publishing businesses, to name a few. The result is a lot of social and environmental impact, as well as the ability to influence a huge amount of people. Importantly, Disney recognized that you cannot entertain a family on the one hand and then disregard the world and circumstances in which they live. Acting responsibly gives the company credibility and authenticity. Accordingly, they have set themselves strict environmental target and disclose their figures in the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, which provides a comprehensive set of indicators covering the economic, environmental, and ethical impact of a company's performance. Setting ambitious financial target together with environmental performance target may sound like oxymoron, but Disney has managed to do it this way with initiatives such as running Disneyland trains on biodiesel made with cooking oil from the resorts hotels. So that what they are doing is that they are using their using the cooking oil, used cooking oil from their resorts, and actually using it the biodiesel in their resorts, Disney trains. They also created the green standard to engage and motivate employees in reducing their environmental impact when working, having meeting, traveling, and eating lunch. With more than 60,000 staff, the results are enormous when everyone is pulling in the same direction. A clear example of financially benefiting from reducing environmental impact is made with this simply statistics. A 10% reduction in the corporation's electricity use is enough to power the annual consumption of 3 of their theme parks. Just look at that, how one company becoming more environmentally responsible and efficient, how they can actually save a lot of revenue, save a lot of cost of the company, and also increase the revenue of the company. Now, if you see that 2012 was a record year for Disney's profit. Now, there is a direct relation between how we became energy efficient, how we actually wanted. So it is not that it is not always that you become you really calculate all the benefits. It requires a lot of passion to be environmentally into environmental friendly, to also see that how we can optimize our efficiency. That passion actually drives you through the profit cycle. So that is why we see that in these businesses, in both of these cases, we see that a certain kind of social and environmental responsibility has given them enormous amount of business return. Now, there are several other examples, like we have discussed few examples in India. We saw the example of Hindustan Unilever. There is ITC, e-Chopal case. There are Britannia biscuit case. So there are several other cases. We see that by becoming socially responsible, the business has actually increased its business performance in terms of profit end of the day. Now, with that, we let's get into the guideline relating to corporate social responsibility. Now, International Accountability Standards, or IAS, their corporate responsibility has witnessed emergence of numerous initiatives aimed at standardizing firms' behavior with regard to social and environmental issues. Now, basically these international accountability standards, they intend to encourage and guide corporate responsibility, provide ways to assess, measure, and communicate organizations' social and environmental performance. So one is that it sets a standard so that you can actually compare your performance against those standards, or the principles. And second thing what you can do is that you can also measure your performance so that you see that how much you have done in terms of social or environmental or economic responsibility. Now there are several international accountability standards. If we categorize them broadly, again these categorization is not mutually exclusive, but for our ease of understanding, let us try to see that if we can categorize that or not. There are few standards who are principle based, so broadly defined principles with regard to social and environmental problems. So you can understand that there are certain principles, so you are following those principles. So it is not mandated, it is not exactly getting into your operations, getting into nitty-gritty, it is not giving you a certification, but these are broad principles we accept as our business principles, or at least we try to follow those principles. So there are a set of principles in terms of accountability standards. Then there are set of standards who are process based. It focused on question of how corporate accountability can achieved. It offers essential managerial guidance on how corporate accountability can be achieved. So it is actually getting into your process, operational guidelines, and say that how you can be more responsible. And then the third category we are talking about, the certification based. It involves certification, as you know, that externally they will come, they will actually assess your performance against few standards and parameters, and accordingly they will certify whether you really achieve in terms of you are performing or meeting some quality parameters in terms of social or environmental or economic responsibility. And there are disclosures, the formats for disclosures, reporting standard based, so that these particular disclosures, they have also few parameters, there are also few indicators, and against that they help you to really disclose your business performance in terms of non-financial performance. So a comprehensive and standardized framework for economic, socially and environmental reporting foster transparency and accountability, while at the same time enables comparisons. Now let us look at some of the examples of that. Some of the examples are principle based. We in this particular course we don't have the scope for getting into the details of each of that, but broadly if you see that principle based standards are the global compact, that UN global compact. So it is not a tool for auditing. It is not that it will get into your operational guidelines or your process, but it is actually giving a set of principles. Some 10 principles are there. So the businesses, they mutually agree to align with those principles in terms of their non-financial performances. Now the second thing is that OECD, as you know that this is economic cooperation and development. What they are doing is that the businesses, it is actually giving a set of principles for those businesses who are working at a multinational level. So transnational companies who are working at different companies, international companies, they are giving a set of principles for them how to behave like. But these are not regulatory, these are not legally binding, right? It is actually giving a principle, it is not legally binding. That is one of the main characteristics of these principle based standards. Now there are another example is the series principles. Again it is 10 point based principles are there from series. So many companies get comply to those principles. Now what are the certification based? Some of the examples like SA 8000. SA 8000 is a certification based standard, but at the same time it is also actually getting into your operation. It gives guidance and some direction to your process. So SA 8000, but primarily it is a certification based standard. Then we see that ISO 14001. This is another certification based, so that it looks at your environmental management system, and it will actually give a certificate after due assessment and audit. Fair Labor Association, they measure your behavior, business behavior against the ILO principles, International Labor Organization principles, and again it gives you a certificate, Fair Labor Association certificate, FLA. Then the process based accountability, AA 1000 series are principle based standards to help organizations become more accountable, responsible, and sustainable. They address issues affecting governance, business models, and organizational strategy, as well as providing operational guidance on sustainability assurance and stakeholder engagement. ISO 26000 is another process based guidance. It offers guidance on socially responsible. It is not a certificate based, it is a guidance based. And reporting, obviously, probably that GRI initiative, it's a very comprehensive, I myself is still stakeholder council member at international level of GRI. It is a very comprehensive framework, and probably at this point of time, the most known framework for disclosure of your non-financial performance. So recently, that it is also includes the entire value chain, and see that different aspects like economic performance, environmental performance, human rights, labor practices, etc., etc. And then the CERIS reporting framework, that is a tool for support facilities and their parent organizations in voluntary public reporting of facility level sustainability performance information. And also here, what we have not mentioned, but we need to see that there is not recent development, quite a bit of time this has come up, the integrated reporting, that IIRC reporting framework, that is talking about integrated. So they are saying that you cannot do your non-financial performance separately, so it has to be integrated in your financial performance itself, so that your non-financial and financial performance about your social environmental behavior has to be integrated in financial terms. It has to be expressed in financial terms. So it is a kind of integrated reporting system what they are doing, and that actually is another aspect we need to understand, and that development probably will have to follow. So we saw that there are different kind of international accountability standards. It includes the principle based, certification based, process based, and the reporting, the disclosure framework. Now, as we talked about, that integrated reporting is now a global trend, and it is already actually mandated in South Africa. European Union Commission now has made it mandatory that companies will have to disclose their non-financial performance. This is mandatory for the European companies. Since last April, they have made it mandatory. Now, what are the national mandate for CSR? Okay, before getting into that, very quickly let us see that what we have discussed till now. We saw that the broader perspective of corporate social responsibility. So when we, last time we discussed about that broader perspective of corporate social responsibility, it is not only about the community work and the risk mitigation, but it has, as we see that, it has that economic, social, and environmental aspect, and it is much broader than the business responsibility. Perspective is much broader than the perspective what we'll be discussing now in the Companies Act. We saw that there are cases where we can link the social and environmental performances, how it is impacting their business performance or financial performances. Then we talked about the different kind of drivers and motivations and of corporate social responsibilities, and ultimately we discussed about the international accountability standards. We saw that there are 4 kind of sets of or categories of accountability standards: principle based, certification based, process based, reporting standard based, and we discussed some of the standards, international standards as it is existing in the global market. And we also discussed that the recent very significant development is that integrated reporting movement, so that it is talking about that how if you take social and environmental responsibilities are core business responsibilities, then how you can separately report it, and if it is influencing your financial behavior or your financial behaviors also mutually influence the social and environmental behavior, then the reporting and the disclosure should be in an integrated manner, and we need to see what are the financial implications of your non-financial behaviors. So that is a broad concept of that integrated reporting system. Now we'll get into the national mandate. In national mandate, we see that in 2009, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs formed a committee. I was also part of that as an advisor, and at that point of time, some of the principles what we could agree with Ministry of Corporate Affairs, or we could actually draw an agreement on that, is that first of all it will not be mandated, because we believed that business, for doing good business or sustainable business, will have to act on a certain manner and on a responsible manner. A business can survive with all kind of irresponsibility, all kind of non-responsible behaviors for a short while, but if they want to do a good business, long-term business, tomorrow's business, they will have to act responsibly. So that we will not mandate or we will not regulate that. What we will do is that we'll set a we'll set a standard, we'll produce a set of principles, so that actually we can influence, we will not regulate, but we will influence the business behavior. And also what we'll do is that we'll sensitize the market, we'll sensitize the stakeholders to create that kind of conducive environment that the behavior that will actually impact the behavior of the businesses. So in 2009, the way it's still there in Ministry of Corporate Affairs website, though it is a voluntary guideline, that is why, because we didn't want to regulate this, so it is a voluntary guideline of business responsibility. It is for responsible business. It is not about, we actually avoided using the term corporate social responsibility. And the principles we talked about, if you see that it's a comprehensive business behavior we are talking about, we are not separating out the social and environmental aspects. So we talked about ethics, transparency, accountability. If a business is ethically not clean, and it is not a transparent and accountable business, then if they do a very good work in the community, would you call that particular business as a socially responsible business? Product life cycle sustainability, that you definitely understand that when we are actually producing a product, for example a battery, how do we actually manage the entire life cycle of that? How do you dispose that? How do you recycle that? Through the whole life cycle, what kind of environmental or social impact it is creating? How do you manage that? Whether we have that particular strategy or not in place. Employee well-being, as we said, that if you are not responsible to your employees, how do you claim that you are socially responsible? Stakeholder engagement, human rights, environment, policy advocacy, So again, in many businesses, directly, indirectly, actually get into policy advocacy, little bit of political influence and all. How transparent we are about that. In India, definitely, it is not that we can actually, lobbying is, we don't have a kind of lobbying protocol, or it is not accepted. So, how we can actually become in a transparent and accountable manner in terms of policy advocacy, inclusive growth, how our business by itself, the product or the services or the process are, driving an inclusive growth or a sustainable growth as a whole, then customers care and value. So those are the broad principles we had actually spelled out in the National Voluntary Guideline. And as I said, that it was on voluntary basis. It was not on a regulation. It was not not a regulation by the government. Now, let's get into the Companies Act, Section 135. So through this Companies Act 2013, Section 135, India is the first country to mandate corporate social responsibility and to mandate a certain amount for a particular group of companies, a certain amount of money to be spent on business corporate social responsibility. And also they have gone ahead by giving a list of broad programs that you will have to comply within that. And as I said, as you can understand, this is a regulatory framework. This is something you will have to comply with, legally, because this is an act. Now, last year, this year, this financial year, sorry, we had the estimation of this that around, say, 200 big companies and 8,800, medium and small companies will invest, and the estimation was that these 200 companies will invest 58,740 million rupees, right? While the 8,800 companies will invest 1,21,260 million rupees. Now, if you see that, these 200 companies alone, they will share the 33% of the total investment, while the 800 companies will have the 67%. So you can understand that many of these 8,800 companies will have a very, very small ticket size. And definitely these 200 companies ticket size or, investment per company would be much bigger. So the whole investment, if you look at, it would be in small, fragments mostly. At least 67% of the total investment would be in small fragments. The smallest company, if you, calculate, they will have to invest 1 lakh rupees a year for corporate social responsibility. Now, that is a challenge, because many of these companies will be investing 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh, 4 lakh, 5 lakh, or, small ticket sizes. It would be very difficult for those companies to create some kind of sustainable development. Even if we take the defined activities according to Section 135, it would be very difficult for a company, as you can understand, who is having 1 lakh, 2 lakh, or 5 lakh budget, how they can actually get, develop a sizable, impactful program. The scale would be so small, and in the smaller companies will have that uncertainty in their profit cycle, because this year, because they are always at a threshold. So this year they are making certain profit. Next year there might not be so much of profit, or might not be profit at all, because the market at this present time is behaving in a volatile manner. So that is one thing, if you look at the macro level picture, is a concern, and we'll have to see that how do we actually make those small investment and these fluctuating investments in a more meaningful manner. Now, if you look at the whole investment, definitely it's a huge investment. 58,000 and 1,21,000. So it's almost, say, 1,80,000 million rupees totally would be invested. So it's a huge amount of money, and definitely it has that potential to create meaningful social impact if it is managed in a proper manner. Now that is the challenge in front of you and me. All of you and me will have that challenge of how we can actually, make our investment more meaningful. Now, another aspect, if you see that I talked about $180,000 million, right? 1,80,000 million, rupees, 1,80,000 million rupees, total CSR investment. And if you look at the total foreign investment in India through the NGOs, the foreign funding to the NGOs is around $100,000 million. So it is at least, 80% more than the present foreign funding to the Indian NGOs will be funded through, or the money would be invested by the CSR funding. So it's quite a significant amount of money if you see in the social sector, and definitely it has the huge potential to create impact in the social sector. Now let's look at the different provisions of the Companies Act. The applicability, if we start with net worth of rupees 500 crore or more, so a company whose net worth is rupees 500 crore or more, they are eligible, or they will have to, they are mandated by the law to invest in corporate social responsibility. Turnover of rupees 1,000 crore or more, net profit of rupees 5 crore or more. So any company which meets any of these criteria, they are mandated to invest 2% of the net profit. I'll discuss how it is calculated in corporate social responsibility. It will also apply to foreign companies registered in India. In any international company, if it has a legal entity in India, they will have to comply with that because they are registered in India. That's common sense, you can understand. Net profit will not include dividend income received from another Indian company following the provisions of the company's law, or from profits of its own overseas branches. So again, just to note, net worth of rupees 500 crore, turnover of rupees 1,000 crore, net profit of rupees 5 crore or more. So that any company meets any of these criteria are mandated. As per the CSR provision of the Companies Act, eligible companies need to constitute a CSR committee of at least 3 directors, of which one should be an independent director, establish a CSR policy indicating the list of activities along with the expenditure of publish the same, spend at least 2% of average net profit during the 3 immediately preceding financial years, and report CSR activities. So 4 core provisions what we see. One is that the governance. How do you govern the corporate social responsibility? You will have to have a CSR committee with 3 directors. So now one significant development in this particular act is that some way it is incorporating corporate social responsibility in your governance process, because 3 of your directors, no less than directors, will constitute the CSR committee, and significantly one of those directors would be an independent director, because that independent director is supposed to bring in a lot of neutral, independent view on the social, non-financial performance, social or environmental performance of that company or policy making of that company. So it is talking about the governance structure of corporate social responsibility. Second thing, it is talking about the policy of corporate social responsibility. Then you will have to develop a CSR policy and you will have to publish it in public domain so that any stakeholder of your company can access to your CSR policy. An investor can actually look at your CSR policy and decide whether I want to invest in this particular company or not. Or any NGO can look at your CSR policy and see that what kind of social and environmental performance you are, uh, integrating in your business operation. Then it is talking about how much money you will have to spend. Now, one thing is taxation. Like the government, probably like our income tax, the kind of any amount of money you earn after a certain level or slab, government will take an amount, a portion of your income as a tax. That's a different thing. But this is one of the very few acts where the government is mandating you to spend some money by yourself. The government is not taxing, government is not taking your money, but the government is asking you to spend a certain amount of your income for a certain purpose. Now, one can challenge that, if I have paid tax, if I have earned money in a legitimate way, then how you can actually, and because this is out of your net profit, so how you can mandate me to spend my money after taxation? If I give, the calculation definitely will be done before taxation, that's a different thing. But if it is a legitimate income, then how you can ask me to spend that money as you wish? So that is one of the debates when we make, this kind of regulations on the companies or the non-state actors, non-state agencies. One of the very important aspect of this act is talking about transparency and disclosure. One, you will have to disclose your policy with your constitution of the committee. No, everything will get into that, what are the elements of the policy, and also it is talking about your disclosure in after the at the end of the financial year, that what you have done against the planned activities. Now, before I move on, let me see if there is any question, and then we'll move on. I forgot I should have actually done this before we start on the Companies Act. Okay, Mrs. Sugandhi is saying that I will like to take an assignment. Sir, would you be able to share a GRI reporting framework with us? GRI reporting framework, you can actually get into the website and you can see the main aspects and components. Too many times the audio is breaking. Okay, I will report it to CII. The technical team should look into that. Sir, we cannot hear you. Miss Anita is asking, okay, got the connection. Just check if the problem is at your end also, because sometimes because of poor connectivity, internet connectivity, sometimes you get bad audio. So, please make sure that it is not on your side. Is there any timeline set in this year for publishing CSR policy and reporting in the public demand? Okay, this Mr. Manish is saying. So it is actually last April 1st. Since April 1st, 2014, this Companies Act is, effective. So that you were supposed to, in this financial year, you were supposed to actually publish your policy, and after 31st of March of 2015, you will have to publish your report. Then Ms. Anusha is asking, sir, could you explain more on why the company need to spend 2% over and above the net profit? That is what we are actually discussing. I'm sure that we'll discuss it more. But definitely, I cannot justify that. This is something mandated by the government. That we like it or not, probably we'll have to comply with that. Well, we can justify it by saying that, okay, otherwise the businesses are not acting responsibility, so that we'll have to at this stage mandate it, so that at least some certain responsibility the businesses will take or not. But as I said that, personally, if you ask me, I believe that the business, to do good business, should behave in that manner. So it should go beyond regulation. And we know that by regulating something, and if we make it compulsory for the business or any private actor, we see all kind of, not so fair means people take to actually perform that, or at least to comply that. We see that we have so many regulations, environment and these, that, and especially in India, we are very, very efficient to manage those compliances, not really to respect those compliances. So that is what, but I, truly speaking, I don't have a very good justification for that. Okay. Then, what is the role of independent directors? I will, Mr. Vikas, I will discuss that definitely. Sir, my company is a 100% subsidy of American company, and we have 2 JVs in India. So if we are to set up a CSR committee, can it be clubbed with all these 3 entities, or should it be separate? I will again discuss on that. I just actually, started those elements, and then I got back to the questions. I thought, let me look at the questions first, and then again I will get into the CSR Act. Sir, can the assignment be on designing CSR policy for my company? Of course, it can be, Ms. Santi. And then, can they be a director in some other CSR committee also? Mr. Vikas Verma is, can they be a director in some other? Yes, of course they can. If an independent director is an independent director in many companies, is or she is on the board of many different companies, he or she could be the member of more than one company's CSR committee. Now with that, let me go back to the Companies Act. Okay, so we discussed about the applicability. We discussed about the 4 major elements. We'll get into the details of those elements, and that will answer many of the questions we have raised. Constitute a CSR committee, one would with 3 directors, one would be independent director, establish a CSR policy that has to be published, spend 2% of your average net profit for last 3 years, average net profits 2%. That you will have to spend. For example, in this year, you are supposed to spend 2003, 2012, and 2013, 2012, and 2011. If you take that all 3 net profits and make an average, then 2% of that average you will have to spend this year. That is the calculation. So X, if it is 2011's net profit, Y 2012's net profit, Z 2013's net profit, then X plus Y plus Z divided by 3. That is the average, and that amount of money you will have to spend this year. So that is the calculation. And then you will have to disclose your CSR activities or CSR performance, what you have been doing. Now we are getting into little detail about the CSR committee. Now we said that CSR committee consisting of 3 or more directors, out of which at least 1 director shall be an independent director. For unlisted public companies or private companies can have a committee without such an independent director, because they will not have independent directors. A private company having only 2 directors on its board shall constitute its committee with 2 such directors. So that some of the private companies who have a small board, only 2 directors are there, they cannot definitely get 3rd director to do that, so that they can constitute that committee with 2 directors only. For foreign company, one of you have asked this. Foreign company committee should have at least 2 persons. For each of the legal entities. Now you'll have to see that if it is a separate legal entity, you will have to have a separate committee. Because your governance structure is different, your registration is different. You will have to have your financial activity, financial reporting separately. So that it depends on whether you are a separate registered entity or not. Per entity, you will have to comply this. For foreign company, committee should have at least 2 persons. 1, resident in India authorized to accept on behalf of company's service or process and any notices or other documents required to be served on the company. That is 1 Indian person who is authorized to act on behalf of the company to accept of any notice or serve any notice or represent the company. The second is that nominated by the foreign company, right? Now, if you look at what are the roles of the company, okay, one of you asked that what is the role of independent director? Now, three of these directors who constitute the CSR committee, they will decide who would be the chair of that committee, and any of them could be the chair. And the independent directors, as you see that independent directors on in governance of a company is to bring in the independent view, and also to carry the interest, to make sure that the interest are protected, interest of the stakeholders, different stakeholders are protected. Because the internal directors, the company's directors who is not an independent director, they might be biased about the company's decisions, right? But the independent director should actually get that perspective, and they should also act to protect the interest of the diverse stakeholders of that particular company. But in Indian situation and even in international level, we see that that ideal situation in many times does not happen. Many times the independent directors are also the yes man or yes woman, in the board. So they say, they nod their heads on whatever the chair is saying, to be on the good book of the chair. So that is the bad practice, but good practice could be that independent directors actually is protecting the interest of the stakeholders. More importantly, in corporate social responsibility, if you see that there might be human rights issues, there might be social conflicts, there might be different. The business is probably not being responsible socially or environmentally in some of the aspects, what might sometimes not really align with the business interest, and that might contradict with the business interest of the company. So sometimes from within the company who are on the board, they might have the difficulties to actually go against the commercial interest of the company, at least in the immediate term. So that the independent director actually have that significant role to raise those issues and be a watchdog in that and a conscience keeper in that particular board. So that is a very, very important role of that particular independent director. Now, if you see that CSR committee's role, formulate and recommend a CSR policy. Now we'll have to look at that, the structure. CSR committee is a subset of the board. It is working on behalf of, it is delegated duty on a particular committee, right? So three of the members of the board are delegated a certain duty, to really focus on. So the CSR committee, what they're doing is that formulate and recommend a CSR policy. So they will actually draft the CSR policy and propose to the board for its approval. But everything is being done with the board's approval. Whatever the decisions at policy level, whatever the reporting, that is actually on behalf of the board they will be doing. Recommend activities and amount of expenditure to be incurred. Again, it is a recommendation. What they will do, probably they will interact with the executives, they will interact with the managers, they will interact with the probably NGO partners, or try to see that what should be the activities and programs, what would be the expenditure, and then again they will place it on the board for board's approval. Monitor the policy from time to time. Please pay your attention to this point. CSR committee is also supposed to monitor the policy so that whatever they have said, whether they are doing that or not, in terms of even implementation of the program, performing those activities, whether they could spend those 2% allocation or not from the net profit, they are responsible to monitor. So it is coming with a responsibility, and if it is not even a liability on them, it is a huge amount of accountability to the company, to the committee, so that whoever is there in the committee, they are accountable for that. It is not just to give the policy and something very, very nice words and something very wishful thinking in the policy and also allocating money, but also to make sure that they are performing. So it is coming with a lot of accountability that you will have to understand. Now look at the board's responsibility. constitute a CSR committee, definitely. So from amongst the board members, they will select two directors and one independent director. And in some cases, if it is a two-director company, as we discussed, that two director can constitute that, etc., etc. Approve a CSR policy so that whatever the CSR committee is placing on the board, they need to review that and discuss on that and give the approval, indicating the list of activities along with the expenditure. So the policy, again, we'll get into the policy little in details, but this is not a typical policy what we understand by policy. This is also a set of activities you will have to mention in the policy. So you'll have to specify in the policy. So we'll have to get into those operational nitty-gritties also to say that what are the specific activities we will be doing in the financial year and what kind of money you are allocating for each of those activities. So that you can understand that to develop the policy, you need to do a lot of groundwork. You will have to understand what kind of programming you will have to do. You will have to do the situation analysis. If you want to do the community need assessment, you need to understand who would be implementing that program, to make sure that what are the activities, where, who would be implementing that, how much money it would be requiring. The whole budgetary exercise has to be there, program planning exercise has to be there. Then only you can mention this. Otherwise, abruptly you mention your wish list in the policy, then definitely while implementing that without those groundworks, you will be in trouble, right? I hope that most of you have already developed the policy and you have followed the process in a proper manner. Now, approve a CSR policy, we discussed, spend at least 2% of average net profit during the 3 immediately preceding financial years. If not, specify the reason for not spending the amount. While reporting, you will have to, so this is either comply or explain. That is the policy. It is not saying that there will be some legal action against you, but you will have to explain that why you have not spent the 2% net profit or 2% of net profit in corporate social responsibility. Now, another thing is that when you are allocating that corporate social, we'll get into that discussion, but just to mention as we got into that, the 2% what you are allocating, as per the calculation of plus 3 years preceding years net average profit, you will have to create a corpus. That money cannot go back to a company or the business or cannot be spent for any other purpose. So if you cannot spend that money with its interest or any other kind of income accumulated will remain in that corpus fund and would be carried over to the next year and get accumulated. So that even then, even if you are not spending that money, you are not taking that money back for any other purpose, even then you will have to explain that why you have not spent that money, why you could not perform as per the policy what you have declared or disclosed. Ensure that the activities are included in CSR policy of the company are undertaken by the company. We discussed about that. Those are the broad responsibilities of the board. Now, as I said, the point to be noted is that this is a part of your governance. It is not, as it used to happen that many good companies used to do a lot of corporate social responsibility, a lot of good work, but it was not a responsibility at the governance level. Even if at governance level people were involved in that, but it was not an accountability, right? Now as it is a part of the act and it is a legal accountability on you if it is not legal liability, and you are supposed to disclose this in public domain, more importantly, so that anybody can look at your plan, anybody can see that, if you are spending the CSR money in your father-in-law's village to construct a school where probably your spouse have studied. So you'll have to declare that where you are spending money, for what you are spending money, how much money you are spending, so that we need to be a little more careful and we need to be transparent and accountable. Now let's look at the CSR policy. What are the elements there in CSR policy? A list of CSR projects which the company plans to undertake, specifying modalities of execution and implementation schedule for the same. Now, so much of details you will have to give in the CSR policy, so that ideally, I don't know how many of you have already developed your CSR policy. I hope all of you have done. Before doing the CSR policy, actually quite a bit of work you will have to do. You'll have to make sure that what are the activities you will be doing, how do you plan all these activities, how do you really do the budget of these activities, because it is not randomly you will actually, in the mid of the year you will decide, okay, some NGO came and that, they made a nice presentation, or probably, sometimes, okay, this guy I know, my friend has referred, so, give some donation to them and spend some money. No. You will have to have a plan prior to implementation that has to be disclosed prior to implementation, and then you will have to follow the plan. Now, it is not only a matter of compliance, but also as any business activities, as any professional activity, if you are spending a certain amount of money and a business money you are spending, and it does not have a proper plan in place, definitely it is not professional work you are doing. So that in a way it is good that at least in compulsion also some of us who are not doing that will have to do that. So some kind of order in the chaos probably we can see. Now, monitoring process of the programs and projects. So it is not only that the activities and the budget, but you will have to explain what is your monitoring process. So, and that is a part of your policy, right? It should also specify that the surplus arising out of the CSR activity shall not form part of the business profit. So as I said, that if there is any surplus, how the surplus could be generated? One is that definitely you could not spend the entire amount of money. Second, it could actually accumulate bank interest. Third, some of the CSR activities might also generate some income. For example, if it is a microfinance program you are doing, or if a craft development program, through that you can generate income. So that income, if it is coming to your bank account, that will remain in that corpus fund, that will not go to the business, go back to the business. So it will be accumulating in your corpus fund, and it will definitely not add on to your business or any other activities. So that also have to be declared in your CSR policy. Now, the company shall give preference to the local area and areas around it where it covers. So when we are talking about the targeting, so those are the elements of the policy. Now, if you are talking about the targeting, where and what, for what we will be spending, the company shall give, it is saying the company shall give preference to the local area and areas around it where the operation, where it operates, for spending the amount earmarked for the CSR activities. So now the question is that whether it is mandated that you will have to spend that money in and around your, your plant or your business unit or your office. It is saying it is the preference will be given. It is not actually, if you look at that language, it is not saying that you will have to spend the entire amount of money there. Yeah. Especially, if you look at the manufacturing companies, there definitely there would be a manufacturing plant, there would be a unit, so that in and around there is a defined community. There might be issues of land acquisition and all this kind of things. So you know your community, target community. But in terms of the service sector, how do you actually determine what is your service, your target community? Now, for a bank, how do you see that actually? What would be your community? Is that in and around your bank branches? Definitely not. I don't think that would be a good, idea to have. But then you will have to decide that what issue you will talk on, you will work on, and what kind of community will be impacted and with whom you will be working, right? So the common misunderstanding about this particular clause is that you will have to spend it in and around your, operation. It is not always. Even as a manufacturing company, you can actually spend a certain amount of money in and around your community, and you can also do many things if it is justified. It does not have to be always physically proximate. It has to be also ideologically proximate to your core business, right? CSR activities will have to be within India, definitely, that you can understand. You cannot take your profit, 2% of your net profit, and go to some other country and spend that money. CSR projects or programs that benefit only the employee and their families will not be considered. So that if you are running a school, hospital for your employees only, then definitely that cannot be shown as a CSR activities under this act. Now, there is a dilemma, as I said, that when you talk about responsible business perspective, then definitely the first thing you will have to be responsible for your staff members, the internal stakeholders. Before getting into the community, installing hand pumps and claiming that you are social responsible, you will have to look at whether you are exploiting your staff members to do that or not, right? But in this particular act, what it is saying that anything what is primarily entirely for your employees. Now there might be little bit of legal interpretation. What do you mean by entirely or only the employees and their families? So that a school where there is a provision of other community members and other stakeholders to participate, not only for your employees, whether that how many, say, for example, if there are 100 children in a school, so whether 75 or 25, what would be the proportion of children should come from outside, that is at this point of time, according to this, is open. So it's a matter of your legal interpretation. But definitely it cannot be only for your employees. Contribution to any political party directly, indirectly will not be considered as CSR activity. That definitely you can understand. There should not be any use of this money for policy formulation, political activities, or doing some kind of influencing the political decision making. Now again, if you look at the CSR spending, if you go back to that point, it's very difficult sometimes to see whether directly or indirectly you are actually influencing the political forces. Quite a bit of skewedness we observe in CSR spending till date in and around very important politicians' constituencies, right? Now, I don't know if there's any mechanism through what you can really prove that directly or indirectly I'm trying to influence the policy. I mean, that is probably you'll have to spend that money in some of the constituencies. Anywhere you spend, that would be a constituency of a political person. Now, whether that is to appease that political person or not, that is something really, really too difficult. But we see that in and around some of the important political personalities' constituency, there's a skewedness of investment. CSR investment. Now implementation, how you implement your program. You can implement your program directly. You can implement your program through a trust registered under Society Act or Trust Act or Companies Act. You can implement the program through an external organization. It could be an NGO. Again, it has to be a registered NGO at least 3 years with 3 years of experience in the similar kind of activities. Or what you can do is that even you can implement that program through another corporate foundation or with another corporate entity, so that you have all options as implementation mechanism. Now you'll have to see what would be the best option for you. Now, in most of the cases, what we see is that not too many even corporate foundations have that implementation mechanism. And because, in most of the cases, the corporate foundation, they again in turn partner with NGOs who are working at the grassroots level, proximate to the community. They partner with them to implement the program. So that even if in most of the cases, the businesses, who don't have that corporate foundation, they definitely have that capability. In most of the cases, I'm saying some of the companies have definitely developed the capability, but in most of the cases, they don't have that capability of grassroots level implementation. And even the grassroots level insight and the perspective of experience and expertise of working with the people and the presence in the community, that is something, they depend on NGOs. So it is important whether you are working through corporate with NGOs working through your corporate foundation with NGOs or in collaboration with other corporates with NGOs, that you are working with the right kind of organization and you are actually, developing right kind of partnership to implement your program. Definitely what I see that partnerships and collaborations will bring in a lot of leveraging in your programming. It might be financial leveraging, it might be expertise, it might be resources of different kinds, but partnership and collaboration would definitely bring in a lot of leveraging, and also that will help us in synchronizing the whole investment to make a meaningful impact. As I said, that it's a huge amount of income, and most of this income would be sporadic in small amount, small sizes like 1 lakh, 2 lakhs a year. So unless and until we create meaningful partnerships, collaborations and collective programs, then definitely it would be in all directions. It would be all kind of programs without any coordination, without any synchronization. So most of the things might be a lot of overlapping. So we can actually bring a little bit of order in that by right kind of collaboration and partnership. So that is the implementation strategy, the way it is prescribed in the Companies Act 2013. Now in terms of disclosure, what you will have to do is that display CSR activities on the website. Definitely you have already disclosed your policy, annual report on CSR. So you will have to publish your corporate social responsibility report. The format to be followed. What are the elements would be there in the report? A brief outline of the CSR policy, CSR committee composition, average net profit for the last 3 financial years, prescribed CSR expenditure, details of CSR spending during the financial year, total amount to be spent, amount unspent if any, and amount spent. So again, if we go through that, a brief outline of the CSR policy, that definitely in the report itself, again you will have to give. CSR committee composition, who were there in your CSR committee, who is the independent director, what is their name, etc., etc. Average net profit for the last 3 financial years on the basis what you have calculated your CSR investment, and prescribed CSR expenditure. So why again you will have to give that, because many a times many companies spend more than 2%. So that if you are planning to spend more than 2%, you can do that, or you can say that okay, X plus Y plus Z, 2% of X plus X plus Y plus Z divided by 3, and 2% of that is what I am spending. That is also fine. Now total amount to be spent, amount unspent if any in the last financial year, and amount spent, right? In case of company has failed to spend 2% on CSR, provide reasons for the same. So there would be a statement saying that why you have not spent 2% of your net profit as prescribed by the Companies Act. A responsibility statement of the CSR committee that the implementation and monitoring of CSR policy is in compliance with CSR objective and policy of the company. So this is a management responsibility statement, as you see that in financial audit report also, annual reports also we publish. There is a responsibility statement. The committee will have to say, as I said, that it is, if it is not a legal binding, definitely a legal binding, it is not a huge legal liability on the individual directors or individual members of the CSR committee. It's a huge amount of accountability on the CSR committee. So you need to understand that when we are selecting the members of CSR committee, first of all, they need to have a genuine interest about that activity. They will have to have the understanding of corporate social responsibility, and third, that willingness to take that responsibility. So otherwise, for any other decorative committee you want to do that, then sometimes you might invite problem for the company and problems for the committee members. The report has to be signed by CEO, managing director or director, so that it is not a random report you got a good communication company, they developed a glossy report and published, and nobody is actually taking responsibility what we have stated in that. And unfortunately, if you put all the CSR reports till now, put it together, you see all these glossy, nice reports and put it together. If you go through that, then you will see, oh my God, actually, the whole country is transformed. That is the way we glorify the work. So that be a little practical, be a little realistic, and all we understand as professionals, if you read a report, that whether that report is stating the realities, the truth, or it is actually just telling a story. So, and this time the report has to be signed by the CEO, MD, director. Tomorrow, if anybody challenges that report, probably from that community where you claim you have done the work and excellent impacts and results you have created, then it would be a real problem, because it is signed by none other than the CEO, MD and director. A report from the CEO, MD or the director. Chairman of the CSR committee will have to sign that. Person specified under clause D of subsection 1 of section. The other people, as I said, that the CSR committee will be constituted in different type of companies, little differently. This provision is there. So, they will have to sign the CSR report. Now, this is the reporting on CSR spend. This is a reporting format you will have to follow. If you go the column by column, CSR project activity identified, what you had identified, sector in which the project is covered. This sector means as it is mentioned in or prescribed in the Schedule 7 of Section 135 of the Companies Act. We'll have a discussion on that also. Then project program, local area or other, state and district of the project programs, so that you will have to mention the location where you are doing, right? So that anybody can actually, any of these your stakeholders, media, NGO, your customers, the community members, for them it would be clear how much money for what activities you are spending in what community and what place, location. Project program wise budget, what was the actual budget you had decided? Amount spent on the project or programs. Surveys would be direct expenses and overheads. So again, how much money you are actually spending for the program. For example, if you have a big office, a lot of staff members, a lot of travel, you'll have to actually split that between the direct program expenses and indirect program expenses or the overhead expenses. So that again will give a good view to your stakeholders that how efficiently you are managing your corporate social responsibility programs. Cumulative expenditure up to the reporting period. So this is another point, what is a good point is that, say, for last 5 years, you were running an education program, and if every year you are giving only that year's expenditure, on the 3rd year or 4th year when I'm picking up the report, I really don't understand the total amount of money has gone into that particular program, because I can access only that particular year's financial figures. But if you are giving the total cumulative figure, I know that in last 4 years you have spent 100 rupees and this year you have spent 20 rupees. So that total, if I look at the results today, I should look at the 100 rupees result. It is not 20 rupees result. Now, amount spent direct or through implementation agencies. So again, you will have to say that how much money you are spending directly, what kind of program you are doing directly, or even how much you have a CSR meeting, you have a CSR staff team, you have an office and all these things. So how much you are spending on that and how much you are actually passing it to the agencies or the NGOs or the implementing agencies. Now, what are those sectors? As we said that, there is a schedule called Schedule 7, and that is actually prescribing a list of sectors. Uh, Within that, we'll have to design our activities or plan our activities. Now, this is something, again, you'll have to see that one of the thing, what I think is a very, I personally feel, it is my personal opinion that it restricts us from innovation and doing something different. And also if you look at that whole schedule, you see there is a kind of mismatch of levels. Each of the sectors at different level. Like if I talk about take up the first case, the first sector, eradicating hunger. Anything of rest of the sectors I can justify and should be part of the strategy of eradicating hunger. Now, promoting education could be a strategy of eradicating hunger. Promoting gender equity could be, because there is a gender disparity in food security. Now, how we can actually exclude that in eradicating hunger. So again, it is not mutually exclusive. One. Second thing is that there is a lot of overlapping, and I would say there is a little bit of confusion of different levels of, how do you prescribe these things. So anyway, whatever is there, it is there, and we'll have to somehow match our activities within this. So eradicating hunger, what we have is poverty, malnutrition, and the promoting preventive health care. Now there was a case in Delhi High Court that why it is only preventive health care, and the verdict, the court actually directed the Minister of Corporate Affairs to say that any kind of health care program could be included here. It is not only preventive, it could be curative, it could be treatment facilities, or whatever is there, that could be defined as your corporate social responsibility. Then you have making available safe drinking water in eradicating hunger. Promoting education, including special education and employment, enhancing vocational skills, especially among children, women, elderly, and the differently abled, and livelihood enhancement projects. Promoting gender equality, empowering women, setting up homes and hostels for women and orphans, setting up old age homes, daycare centers, and such other facilities for senior citizens, and measures for reducing inequalities faced by socially and economically backward group. Environmental sustainability, this is, the other things were mostly, working with people and community, except this particular sector, environmental sustainability, ecological balance, protection of flora and fauna, animal welfare, agroforestry, conservation of natural resources, and maintaining quality of soil, air, and water. Then protection of national heritage. In the initial list, actually, as far as I remember and as far as I know, it was not there, but later probably some influence of some of the, group of, stakeholders probably has made the MCA to include that. Art and culture, including restoration of building and sites, historical importance and work for arts, setting up libraries, promotion and development of traditional arts and handicrafts, welfare of armed forces, veterans and dependents, benefit of armed forces, veterans, war widows and their dependents, promotion of sports. Even these things were not there, as far as I know, in the first version of the schedule. Training to promote rural sports, nationally recognized sports, Paralympic sports, and Olympic sports. Then Prime Minister's National Relief Fund. Definitely, if you don't have any program, if you don't have any plan to do anything directly or indirectly, you can give the entire money to Prime Minister's Relief Fund and say that my social responsibility is over. And you can actually get the license as a socially responsible business. Technology incubators located with academic institutions which are approved by the central government. This is very interesting. I think, we can actually, it is required for the sector that a lot of incubation, a lot of innovation, technological innovation comes to the social sector. And definitely, I wish that many of the companies will be interested about that. And basically, the technology probably would be one of the core strengths of on many businesses. So that I would like to see that there would be a lot of interesting work in this particular thing. Rural development. As I said, that rural development is a big blanket, and many of these things, probably all of these other sections can be, or sectors can be explained as rural development. Now, how do you allocate your budget? The companies need to spend 2% of their 3 years average annual net profit on CSR activities in each financial years, beginning the next fiscal year 2014-15. So as I said that April 1st, 2014, since then it is already, effective, the act. So in this particular year, we are supposed to start complying with that act, so that you will have to have a policy, you will have to have a committee, you will have to spend that 2% of last 3 years net profit, you will have to report after this financial year, so that after 31st of March 2015, you will have to report about your CSR work, or you will have to explain why you have not done that. All expenditure, including the contribution to corpus of the project program relating to CSR activities approved by the board, not include expenditure on activities that do not fall under the purview of Schedule 7 of the Act. So anything you are doing which is not falling within the provisions created in the Schedule 7, what we have just discussed, cannot be shown as your CSR activity, or budget cannot be allocated for that. Capacity building cost not to exceed 5% of total CSR expenditure. So that any training, any capacity building event you are doing for yourself, for the community and other things, definitely that's a different thing. For yourself, for your team, if you are doing, then should not actually cross 5% of the total CSR expenditure in one financial year. Otherwise, I might go to Switzerland to have a nice training program for 15 days and spend 50% of my CSR budget and come back. That might happen. So that there's a cap that 50% of your total CSR budget, 5% not more than 5% of your total CSR budget can be spent for capacity building work. Now with that, I will end today's session, but before that, let me see if there is any other question. If you have, I'll try to answer those. Okay. Can the salary of independent director taken as CSR expense? I don't think so. This is Mr. Vikas Verma. Actually, it is not. I mean, the remuneration you are talking about. Can you share the job description of the independent director? There is no job description for independent director as such. I mean, independent director is not your employee, so definitely it is not a job description. But if you want to know about the role of the independent directors, next session probably I can actually give you a very brief, because we don't have much time on that. That's a separate session I take altogether. It takes at least 2 days. But I will probably provide a broad role of the independent director. Can the CSR policy be changed in, let's say, 6 months' time? Definitely, any policy can be reviewed and revised. It should not be written on stone. And definitely, I would say that it should be a dynamic, it should be a live document. But definitely, every month you cannot change that, because there is a board decision. and very frequent changes actually will not reflect a good thing on you. Can a good reason be that the CSR funds are being spent on a 3-year period and clubbed together so that the first year can show less spends and next 2 years can spend more? Can a good reason be that the CSR funds are being spent on a 3-year period and clubbed together? I am not very clear, Mr. Vikas. If you write to me on a separate mail, I might answer that. But one thing I'd say that, in most of the cases when I get involved in designing these programs and CSR policies, what I suggest to the company is that if you are actually having 100 rupees and don't plan something for 1 year for 3 activities, 33 rupees each. You might probably plan one particular program this year and complete the entire cycle, so that 33 rupees into 3 years, 3-year cycle you can complete for that particular education program or health program, whatever is that, and allocate and save that entire money, so that every year if you are giving an explanation that actually first year we have allocated the entire life cycle budget for that project, I think that's a very good reason to explain. And then in the second year you might get the second program for next 3 years, third year you get the third program for the next 3 years. So with that, at least you make sure that for the entire project cycle you have money to do that, to cover that, to support that program or to run that program. Otherwise what happens is that, if you take up only annual budget, if you get into, then you will have to get into activities. You cannot get into a project cycle. So that is why you might get into a project cycle. Anyway, I would request you to, write back through mail. I will try to answer your question. With respect to choosing the CSR programs, does it mean that we have to have a list of projects we would like to undertake during the years, or it is sufficient to take up projects as and when? No, you will have to have a list of projects. Yeah, you will have to have a planned projects. So is it not as and when? So you will have to actually, the policy itself, you will have to say what are the 5 things you will be doing. CSR programs that benefits only for employees and their families will not be considered. Does that mean that the program can be targeted to the larger community, which includes employees as well? Well, one interpretation is like that also, as I mentioned. But I will not give you a legal opinion, but for me, it is open for interpretation. As it is saying only employees, so it is whether it is out of 199 are employees and 1 is community members, or 99 are community members, 1 is employee, that is something open for interpretation. Is it allowed for companies to change the project sectors each year? Yeah, it is allowed. I mean, you'll have to declare that, but whether that is something good for the program or not, that is something we'll have to do, because any program I see that, we'll have to go through a project cycle. We'll discuss all these things when we'll discuss about the project planning and program planning. So I will request all of you, just don't think in terms of activities on annual basis. Please think in terms of project cycle. What about contribution to natural disasters, like we have provided our employees who were in Kashmir and lost their homes 1 lakh each? My personal opinion is that it should be allowed. And see, in disaster management, whatever you do, that will fall into one of these sections. So either you are working for food security, you are working on education, you are working on shelter. So you can actually, if I were in your position, I would have justified my disaster management program in all the sections. So that way, I think there should not be any problem, but that is my personal opinion. What about, no, then you are saying that company paid equal amount as other, the same thing. Sir, kindly share us the PPT for our reference. All these presentations will be uploaded in mycii.in. It is already uploaded, I think. It will be sent to? To individual. So it will be shared with you, and also if you go to mycii.in, you will get the audio also. They are recording the whole session, so you will get the presentation and the audio in mycii.in, and you will also get all these presentations in CSO Partners website. So employees paid voluntary and co-paid equal amount. No, see, any contribution made by the employees cannot be counted in your CSR budget. So that your payroll giving or your employees contribution for any disaster thing or anything cannot be counted in your CSR budget. That can be over and above your 2%. Mr. Vikas Verma is saying yes, would like to know the broad role of independent directors. Yeah, I will try to actually, at least briefly discuss that. I recall from earlier saying that the CSR project should be toward underprivileged only. I do not see that in your presentation today has this changed. Well, as I said, that CSR program, if you get into the broader perspective of CSR program, it is not only underprivileged, it has a different purpose. But definitely, if we actually look at this kind of spending, like 2% spending, I totally with you that we should target the marginalized first, the most marginalized first, to make it more inclusive, the growth more inclusive. We discussed about inclusive growth, so I see that definitely in that you will have to probably target the poorest of the poor. But sometimes it is not only on financial terms, it is also socially deprived. You will have to look at socially marginalized. So, you'll have to look at the caste dynamics, you'll have to look at the gender dynamics and all these things. And we'll discuss all these things again when we'll discuss about the program sectors and all, that how we can actually target programs more effectively. Definitely that cannot be changed. I mean, that should be the focus of any program. We are yet to start the CSR activity for this year. So in March, can we give the explanation that we will do spend in 2015-16 on 3 years? I mean, it is up to you. You'll have to give that explanation. There is no other way. It is either you comply or to explain, Ms. Anita. So, you'll have to see that what explanation you will give, that you'll have to say why you have not spent. It is not enough to say we'll spend that money next year. You'll have to say that why you have not spent. Probably you'll have to say, that's why it will look bad. And that is why it actually, make some kind of condition where we'll have to perform. It will look bad because this year you'll have to say that we were not ready this year, probably. So that will look bad little. But, no harm in saying the truth. I understand for 2014-15, organizations have to spend 2% of the profit earned during the 2011-14. How about the expenditure for 2015-16? Please clarify. Again, for 2015-16, you will have to take 14, 13, and 12. It will go like that. Also, if any upcoming CSS seminar in Delhi. Well, there are hundreds of CSS seminars happening, events are happening. I will definitely, if there is anything, I come across something really, really meaningful and good for you, I will let you know. So with that, there is no other question. So we are right on time. Thank you so much. As I said that 3 sessions, next 3 sessions are postponed, changed. We'll get back to you with new dates. What is that? Can we give the date? 6th is not available. Okay, the next session would be 9th January, as it is scheduled. 9th is already scheduled. So in between 3 sessions are postponed. We'll get back to you with the alternative dates for those 3 sessions. Thank you so much. 6th is not available.